To pray without ceasing does not mean repeating words endlessly or spending every moment on your knees. It is a state of consciousness in which the soul remains quietly aware of the divine presence, whether the body is working, resting, speaking, or moving through daily responsibilities. When a person begins to practice this form of prayer, something subtle yet powerful happens. Life stops feeling divided between spiritual moments and ordinary moments. Instead, everything becomes sacred. Washing dishes, driving to work, speaking with friends, or sitting in silence all become opportunities to remain inwardly connected to the presence that sustains life itself. At first the mind resists, thoughts wander, worries return, and circumstances seem overwhelming. But as one gently returns again and again to the inner stillness, a transformation begins. Fear slowly loses its grip because the soul starts recognizing that it is never alone. Beneath all appearances there is a sustaining power that guides and protects. Praying without ceasing also changes how challenges are faced. Instead of reacting in panic or frustration, a quiet listening develops. In that listening comes wisdom, sometimes as intuition, sometimes as unexpected solutions, and sometimes as peace even before the solution arrives. Problems do not always disappear immediately, but the inner disturbance fades, allowing clarity to lead the way. Another remarkable change occurs in relationships. When consciousness rests in spiritual awareness, judgments soften and compassion grows. One begins to see others not merely through their actions or faults, but as souls seeking peace just as we are. This gentle shift reduces conflict and brings harmony where tension once lived. Continuous prayer also reveals that true fulfillment does not come from external achievements alone. Success, possessions, and recognition lose their power to define happiness. Instead, a quiet joy emerges from within, a joy not dependent on circumstances but rooted in spiritual connection. Perhaps the greatest blessing of praying without ceasing is the discovery that God is not distant or occasional but present here and now. In silence, in activity, in solitude, and even in chaos, the divine remains available to anyone willing to turn inward and acknowledge that presence. And so, to pray without ceasing is to live each moment with spiritual awareness, trusting that guidance unfolds step by step. It is less about speaking to God and more about living with God, moment by moment, breath by breath, until life itself becomes a living prayer. True prayer begins not with words spoken by the lips, but with an awakening that takes place within consciousness, where one becomes aware of a presence deeper than thought and more enduring than emotion. Many people grow up believing prayer must be verbal, structured, or repeated in specific forms, yet spiritual understanding gradually reveals that the essence of prayer is not found in repetition but in awareness. When prayer becomes inner awareness, it shifts from being an occasional act to becoming a quiet state of living connection, where one feels guided, sustained, and accompanied even without speaking a single word. Constant verbal prayer can sometimes become mechanical, where words are spoken while the mind remains anxious or distracted. A person may ask repeatedly for help, protection, or solutions, yet remain inwardly filled with fear and uncertainty. True prayer, however, is the opposite of inner struggle. It is the still recognition that divine presence is already active within and around us. Instead of striving to reach God through effort, awareness allows us to notice that the connection has always existed, waiting only to be recognized. This inner awareness changes the purpose of prayer. Rather than asking endlessly for things to change, the individual begins to seek alignment with spiritual truth. One starts to listen rather than speak, to feel rather than demand, to trust rather than worry. In that quiet awareness, understanding unfolds naturally. Decisions become clearer because they are no longer driven purely by fear or desire but guided by a deeper intuition that arises from inner stillness. As this understanding develops, prayer becomes something carried into daily life rather than confined to certain moments. A person walking through a busy street, working at a desk, or speaking with others can remain inwardly conscious of divine presence. There is no need for outward display, the connection is silent yet real. Gradually, the individual notices that reactions soften. Situations that once caused irritation or panic now meet a calmer response because awareness replaces impulsive reaction. Inner awareness in prayer also reshapes how problems are perceived. Instead of seeing difficulties as overwhelming forces, one begins to observe them with a sense of spiritual perspective. This does not mean challenges disappear immediately, but fear begins to lose its dominance. When awareness replaces constant verbal pleading, a sense of quiet confidence emerges, allowing solutions to reveal themselves in unexpected ways. Ideas surface, opportunities appear, or circumstances shift naturally because the mind is no longer clouded by anxiety. Another effect of understanding prayer as awareness is the realization that divine guidance does not always arrive through dramatic signs or sudden miracles. Often it appears as subtle insight, a gentle feeling of peace, or a quiet knowing about the next step to take. Such guidance can easily be missed when one is constantly speaking or mentally asking for answers. Awareness requires listening, and listening requires inner stillness. Living in this awareness also influences relationships. When a person remains inwardly connected to spiritual presence, judgment softens and patience grows. Others are no longer seen merely as obstacles or sources of frustration, but as fellow travelers navigating their own struggles. Compassion becomes more natural because awareness reveals the shared spiritual nature underlying human differences. Furthermore, understanding prayer as awareness dissolves the feeling of separation between sacred and ordinary moments. Cooking, cleaning, working, and resting all become part of spiritual living. Every moment holds the potential for connection because awareness does not depend on location or ritual. The divine presence is experienced not only in places of worship but also in the simplicity of everyday life. With time, this practice leads to a profound internal shift. One discovers that peace does not need to be created, it already exists beneath the restless surface of thought. Prayer then becomes less about seeking peace and more about recognizing it. Fearful thoughts may still arise, but they no longer dominate because awareness allows them to pass without controlling the mind. Ultimately, true prayer as inner awareness invites a person to live from a deeper center where trust replaces constant striving. Words still have their place, and spoken prayers can offer comfort, but they become expressions of gratitude or communion rather than desperate requests. Life begins to feel guided rather than chaotic, and even in uncertain moments there remains a quiet assurance that one is supported by a presence greater than personal understanding, gently drawing the heart toward peace and clarity in each unfolding moment as awareness continues to deepen within the rhythm of everyday living, and spiritual consciousness remains quietly active beneath every experience and perception throughout the unfolding journey of life. Continuous prayer is often misunderstood as an unending stream of spoken petitions, yet its deeper meaning points to a life lived in conscious union with the divine presence. It is not about constantly thinking religious thoughts or repeating sacred phrases, but about maintaining an inner awareness that one's life is inseparably connected to a higher source of wisdom, love, and guidance. This understanding transforms prayer from an occasional act into a continuous state of spiritual companionship that accompanies every moment of daily existence. When a person begins to live with this awareness, the sense of isolation that often burdens the human heart gradually diminishes. Many struggles arise from the feeling of being alone, responsible for solving every problem through personal effort. Conscious union with the divine shifts this perspective. Instead of facing life as an individual battling circumstances, one begins to sense a partnership with a greater intelligence that quietly supports every step. This awareness does not remove responsibility but replaces anxiety with trust, allowing actions to arise from clarity rather than fear. Living in conscious union also changes how one approaches decisions. Instead of reacting impulsively or being driven solely by external pressures, a person learns to pause inwardly and listen. In that listening, subtle guidance often emerges. Sometimes it appears as an intuitive feeling, sometimes as a sudden understanding, or sometimes as a deep peace about a particular direction. Decisions made from this awareness tend to carry less regret, because they are rooted in inner harmony rather than emotional impulse. This union is not dependent on specific places or rituals. A person may experience it while sitting quietly, walking through a crowded street, or performing routine tasks. The awareness becomes like a gentle background presence, steady and reassuring, reminding the individual that life is sustained by something greater than personal effort alone. Over time, ordinary moments begin to feel meaningful because they are no longer seen as separate from spiritual life. Continuous prayer in this sense also reshapes how challenges are experienced. Difficulties still occur, but the response changes. Instead of immediate panic or discouragement, there is a quiet turning inward, a remembrance of divine presence even in uncertainty. This inward turning often brings calmness, allowing solutions or next steps to become visible. Sometimes circumstances change, other times the strength to endure or adapt emerges from within, showing that guidance is not always about removing obstacles but about transforming how they are faced. Another significant change occurs in emotional life. Conscious union with the divine gradually softens the intensity of fear, anger, and resentment. These emotions may still arise, but they no longer dominate the heart for long. Awareness creates space between feeling and reaction, allowing compassion and understanding to replace immediate judgment. Relationships benefit from this shift, as patience grows and conflicts are approached with greater empathy. Living in union with divine presence also affects how success and failure are perceived. When identity is rooted only in achievements or recognition, disappointments can feel devastating. However, when life is lived in spiritual awareness, self-worth becomes less dependent on external outcomes. Success is appreciated, but it does not define one's value, and setbacks are seen as temporary experiences rather than final verdicts. This perspective brings stability and resilience in a world constantly changing. Continuous prayer also encourages gratitude. As awareness deepens, one begins to notice small blessings that were previously overlooked, the kindness of others, moments of beauty, unexpected help, or simple peace during quiet times. Gratitude naturally arises when life is experienced as supported rather than random. This gratitude further strengthens the sense of connection, creating a cycle where awareness leads to appreciation, and appreciation deepens awareness. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of conscious union is the realization that divine presence is not distant or reserved for special moments. It is accessible here and now within ordinary experience. The separation often felt between spiritual life and daily living begins to dissolve. Work, conversation, rest, and service become expressions of the same spiritual reality. Life itself becomes an unfolding dialogue between the soul and the presence guiding it. As this awareness stabilizes, a person finds less need to constantly seek reassurance from outside sources. Inner confidence grows because guidance is felt within. Even in uncertainty, there remains a subtle assurance that each step is being directed in ways not always immediately visible but ultimately meaningful. The mind becomes quieter, reactions gentler, and life feels less like a struggle and more like a journey accompanied by unseen support, where every breath carries the silent remembrance of divine companionship, and every moment becomes an opportunity to live in harmony with the presence, sustaining all existence and guiding consciousness toward peace and understanding without interruption or separation across us. The holding experiences of daily life and spiritual awareness continues to flow within every action, perception, and silent moment of inward recognition of that eternal union. Many people approach prayer as a time to speak, request, or express their needs, believing that spiritual connection depends primarily on what is said. Yet a deeper spiritual understanding reveals that silence and listening often carry greater power than words. When the mind becomes quiet and the heart turns inward in stillness, a space opens where divine wisdom can be perceived more clearly. Silence is not emptiness, it is the atmosphere in which deeper understanding and spiritual guidance can emerge without interference from restless thoughts. In daily life, the mind is constantly active, moving from one concern to another, replaying past events, worrying about the future, and reacting to circumstances almost automatically. When prayer becomes only verbal expression, the mind may continue its restless activity even while sacred words are spoken. Listening, however, requires stillness. It invites the individual to release constant mental noise and allow a deeper awareness to surface. In that quiet space, one begins to sense insights and clarity that are often hidden beneath mental activity. Listening in prayer is not about expecting a voice or dramatic revelation. More often, guidance arrives gently, as subtle intuition, a sense of peace about a decision, or a quiet recognition of truth. These impressions can easily be missed when one is focused only on speaking or asking. Silence allows awareness to sharpen, making it possible to recognize guidance that does not come through sound but through inner knowing. This practice also changes the emotional state of the person praying. Verbal prayer often begins from a place of anxiety or urgency, with requests for help or solutions. Silence, on the other hand, invites trust. When one becomes quiet before the divine, it is an expression of confidence that guidance already exists and will be revealed at the right moment. Instead of striving to persuade or convince, the heart rests in openness, allowing understanding to unfold naturally. Listening also cultivates humility, an essential quality in spiritual growth. When individuals constantly speak, they may unconsciously assume they know exactly what is needed. Silence acknowledges that human understanding is limited and that greater wisdom lies beyond personal reasoning. By listening, one becomes willing to receive insight rather than insist upon personal expectations. This openness often leads to solutions or perspectives that would not have been discovered through mental effort alone. In practical terms, silence during prayer influences everyday living. A person who learns to listen inwardly develops patience and restraint in conversations and decisions. Instead of reacting quickly, there is a tendency to pause and consider deeper implications. This habit reduces conflict and misunderstandings, as responses arise from reflection rather than impulse. Relationships benefit when individuals listen not only to God but also to one another with genuine attention. Silence also has a healing effect on the mind and body. Continuous mental activity can create stress and exhaustion, while moments of stillness allow emotional and physical tension to ease. In quiet prayer, breathing slows, thoughts settle, and the nervous system relaxes. This inner calm often leads to clearer thinking and renewed energy. Problems that seemed overwhelming may appear more manageable after time spent in silent awareness. Another important aspect of listening prayer is the realization that divine presence is not distant or separate. Silence allows individuals to sense this presence within their own consciousness rather than seeking it externally. The awareness that guidance and peace arise from within changes how life is experienced. Instead of searching constantly for external reassurance, one begins to trust inner direction and remain calm amid uncertainty. Silence also encourages gratitude and appreciation. In stillness, one becomes more sensitive to the subtle blessings present in everyday life. The beauty of nature, kindness from others, and simple moments of peace become more noticeable when the mind is not consumed by constant noise. Gratitude naturally grows, deepening spiritual awareness and reinforcing the sense of connection with the divine. Listening in prayer does not mean abandoning spoken prayer entirely. Words still serve as expressions of praise, gratitude, and devotion. However, they become balanced with moments of quiet receptivity. The dialogue between the soul and divine presence becomes mutual rather than one-sided, allowing deeper communion to develop. Over time, those who practice silent listening discover that guidance often comes at unexpected moments, even outside formal prayer. Insights arise while walking, working, or resting because the mind has learned to remain open and attentive. Life begins to feel less chaotic as decisions and actions flow from a quieter center. The habit of inner listening continues beyond specific prayer times, gently influencing attitudes, choices, and relationships, allowing peace and understanding to unfold naturally as silence reveals wisdom hidden beneath constant mental activity, and the heart learns to trust the quiet presence guiding every moment within the rhythm of ordinary life and communications consciousness. Presence and quiet awareness of divine presence and its community in Simon and community. When a person remains spiritually attentive throughout the day, a profound shift takes place within the inner life, gradually replacing fear with trust. Fear often arises from uncertainty, from the feeling that circumstances are beyond control and that outcomes depend solely on personal effort. Spiritual attentiveness, however, nurtures the awareness that life unfolds within a greater intelligence and purpose. As this awareness deepens, the grip of fear weakens, making space for confidence and calm assurance even when situations appear challenging. Most fears are rooted in anticipation of future difficulties or regret over past experiences. The mind moves constantly between memories and imagined outcomes, creating anxiety about what might happen next. Spiritual attentiveness brings attention back to the present moment, where divine presence can be recognized as active and sustaining. When consciousness rests in this awareness, worries about what may come lose some of their power because the individual feels supported here and now rather than abandoned to uncertain circumstances. Trust develops gradually through repeated inward turning. Each time a person pauses amid worry and becomes aware of divine presence, the emotional intensity of fear softens. Situations that once triggered panic begin to meet a calmer response. This does not mean problems vanish instantly, but inner resilience grows. Instead of reacting with despair, one becomes capable of meeting difficulties with steadiness and patience, trusting that guidance or solutions will emerge in time. Spiritual attentiveness also alters how uncertainty is perceived. Life inevitably includes moments where outcomes cannot be predicted or controlled. Without spiritual grounding, such moments often lead to anxiety and frustration. However, when awareness remains centered in divine presence, uncertainty becomes less threatening. The individual begins to see challenges as part of a larger unfolding rather than random misfortune. This perspective nurtures trust that each experience carries lessons or opportunities for growth, even when their purpose is not immediately clear. Another transformation occurs in decision-making. Fear often leads to hurried or defensive choices aimed at avoiding discomfort. Spiritual attentiveness encourages inward listening before action. By pausing to reconnect with inner awareness, decisions are guided by clarity rather than panic. This habit reduces regret because actions are aligned with deeper intuition rather than temporary emotional pressure. Trust also influences how one relates to others. Fear frequently manifests as suspicion, jealousy, or defensiveness in relationships. When spiritual awareness becomes a daily practice, compassion and understanding replace many reactive tendencies. One begins to recognize that others are also navigating their own struggles and uncertainties. This recognition softens judgments and fosters patience, leading to more harmonious interactions. Maintaining spiritual attentiveness throughout the day does not require withdrawal from responsibilities or constant meditation. Instead, it involves small moments of inward remembrance, pausing before responding, taking a breath during stress, or quietly acknowledging divine presence while performing routine tasks. These brief returns to awareness accumulate, gradually reshaping emotional responses and strengthening trust. This trust also affects physical and mental well-being. Persistent fear can lead to tension, exhaustion, and health challenges. As spiritual attentiveness reduces anxiety, the body often responds with greater relaxation and energy. The mind becomes clearer, and concentration improves because mental energy is no longer consumed by constant worry. Even when pressures remain, the inner response becomes steadier, allowing individuals to handle responsibilities more effectively. Another important aspect of trust born from spiritual awareness is the reduction of the need to control everything. Many anxieties stem from attempts to manage outcomes beyond personal influence. Spiritual attentiveness teaches surrender, not as resignation but as cooperation with a greater wisdom guiding life. One learns to do what is possible while releasing excessive worry about results. This balance between effort and trust creates peace even in demanding situations. Gratitude naturally grows as fear diminishes. When awareness is centered in spiritual presence, attention shifts from what is lacking to what is already present. Small blessings become noticeable, reinforcing trust that life offers support in many forms. Gratitude strengthens faith, creating a positive cycle where trust leads to appreciation, and appreciation deepens trust. Over time, spiritual attentiveness becomes less of a deliberate practice and more of a natural state. The mind learns to return to inner awareness automatically during stress or uncertainty. Fear may still arise occasionally, but it no longer dominates consciousness. Instead, trust emerges more quickly, reminding the individual that guidance and strength are always available. Life continues to bring both joy and challenge, yet the heart remains steadier, anchored in the quiet confidence that each moment unfolds within a presence greater than personal understanding. Sustaining hope and clarity as spiritual awareness gently replaces anxiety with calm assurance, and trust continues to grow within the rhythm of daily living where divine guidance remains quietly active and presence and presence of the remembrance of dissolves in the steady remnant peace and within the run but in circumstances without description that project information and the square of spiritual and German when a person begins to live with spiritual awareness, a subtle yet profound transformation occurs in the way daily activities are experienced. Actions that once seemed routine or burdensome gradually take on a deeper meaning because they are no longer seen as separate from spiritual life. Every activity, no matter how small or ordinary, becomes an opportunity to remain conscious of divine presence. This awareness turns common moments into sacred experiences, revealing that spirituality is not confined to prayer rooms or special occasions but woven into the fabric of everyday living. Many people unconsciously divide life into spiritual and non-spiritual segments. Prayer, meditation, or worship are considered holy while working, cleaning, commuting, or handling responsibilities are viewed as ordinary tasks disconnected from spiritual growth. Yet when awareness of divine presence becomes constant, this separation begins to dissolve. Cooking a meal, speaking with a colleague, caring for family, or even performing repetitive work can become expressions of gratitude and service when done with conscious attention and inner peace. The change begins with intention. When individuals start their day with awareness that divine presence accompanies every step, tasks are no longer approached with resentment or boredom. Instead, each responsibility becomes a chance to practice patience, kindness, and mindfulness. Even challenging duties become opportunities to grow spiritually as they teach endurance, humility, and compassion toward others. Spiritual awareness also alters the emotional experience of work and responsibility. Stress often arises when tasks are seen only as obligations or pressures. However, when work is performed with awareness of divine presence, the focus shifts from mere completion to meaningful participation in life's unfolding. One begins to recognize that every contribution, no matter how small, plays a role in supporting others or sustaining community. This understanding brings dignity and satisfaction to even the simplest efforts. Relationships benefit greatly when activities are approached with spiritual consciousness. Conversations become more attentive, listening becomes more sincere, and interactions carry greater respect. Instead of rushing through encounters while mentally preoccupied, one becomes fully present with others. This presence communicates care and empathy, strengthening connections and reducing misunderstandings. Ordinary social interactions become sacred moments where kindness and understanding can be expressed naturally. Even solitary activities gain depth through awareness. Cleaning a room, walking outdoors, or completing routine errands can become times of quiet reflection rather than mechanical tasks. In these moments, the mind can rest in gratitude or silent communion with divine presence. What once felt monotonous may begin to feel calming and restorative, offering opportunities for inner stillness amid daily responsibilities. Another transformation occurs in how difficulties within daily activities are handled. When awareness remains centered spiritually, frustrations such as delays, mistakes, or unexpected problems are met with greater patience. Instead of reacting with irritation, one learns to pause and remember that every situation offers a chance to practice understanding and composure. Challenges become teachers rather than obstacles, shaping character and deepening spiritual maturity. Spiritual awareness also encourages excellence in action. When tasks are seen as offerings rather than burdens, individuals tend to perform them with greater care and dedication. Attention to detail, honesty, and responsibility naturally increase because actions are no longer motivated solely by external reward, but by an inner desire to reflect integrity and gratitude in everything done. This perspective influences how time is perceived as well. Rather than rushing constantly toward future goals, one begins to appreciate the present moment within each activity. Whether preparing food, working on a project, or spending time with loved ones, attention remains rooted in the now. This presence reduces stress and allows joy to emerge from simple experiences often overlooked in the pursuit of larger ambitions. Furthermore, recognizing every activity as sacred fosters humility. One realizes that no task is beneath dignity when performed with love and awareness. Serving others, assisting colleagues, or caring for one's environment becomes an expression of spiritual connection. The distinction between serving God and serving people disappears because both are experienced as part of the same sacred reality. As awareness deepens, gratitude becomes more natural. Everyday blessings such as shelter, food, companionship, and opportunities for work become more noticeable. Appreciation grows for the simple rhythms of life, reinforcing the understanding that divine presence operates not only in extraordinary events but also in ordinary moments, quietly sustaining existence. Gradually, life ceases to feel fragmented between sacred and secular experiences. The individual discovers that spirituality is not an escape from daily responsibilities but a way of living within them with peace and meaning. Work, rest, conversation, and solitude all become expressions of the same spiritual awareness, transforming routine living into a continuous act of quiet devotion where every movement and task reflects inner gratitude and consciousness of divine presence, allowing ordinary experiences to reveal their hidden sacredness as awareness continues to flow through each activity and perception within daily life, gently reminding the heart that holiness is present in every moment and every action performed with mindful attention and spiritual remembrance. Throughout the unfolding journey, human experience and sacred remains active in all that is bonds the rhythm of living with devotion, option continuing between devotion used to reflect the presence, sustaining light in synchronity without interruption or revision between sacred and ordinary with an ordinary existence. When consciousness remains aligned with spirit, life begins to unfold in ways that feel naturally guided rather than forced. Many people search outside themselves for peace, healing, or direction, believing these blessings must be obtained through external circumstances or achievements. Yet spiritual alignment reveals that what is most deeply needed already exists within consciousness, waiting to be recognized. When awareness rests in harmony with divine presence, peace, guidance, and healing flow as natural expressions of that connection rather than as distant goals to be pursued. Alignment with spirit begins as an inward turning away from constant mental agitation. The human mind often becomes crowded with worries, desires, and judgments that obscure deeper awareness. When attention shifts inward through quiet reflection or prayerful stillness, a calmer state emerges. In that calmness, the individual senses a presence beyond personal thinking, a sustaining intelligence that gently influences thought and action. This experience gradually reshapes how life is perceived, replacing confusion with clarity. Peace is often the first evidence of spiritual alignment. Instead of depending entirely on favorable conditions, peace begins to arise from within. Circumstances may still fluctuate, but the inner response becomes steadier. Problems that once caused overwhelming anxiety lose some of their intensity because consciousness is no longer dominated by fear. This inner peace allows clearer perception, enabling individuals to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively to challenges. Guidance also becomes more noticeable when consciousness aligns with spirit. Decisions that once felt confusing or burdensome begin to feel simpler because intuition becomes clearer. Guidance does not always appear as dramatic revelation. It often comes quietly through insight, opportunity, or a persistent sense of direction. A person aligned spiritually becomes more attentive to these subtle signals, recognizing that wisdom often arises within rather than from external pressure. Spiritual alignment also changes how one relates to mistakes and setbacks. Instead of viewing difficulties as failures, they are seen as opportunities for growth or redirection. This perspective reduces self-criticism and discouragement. Even when plans do not succeed as expected, there remains a quiet confidence that something beneficial can emerge from the experience. Trust replaces despair because awareness remains centered in divine presence rather than temporary outcomes. Healing, both emotional and sometimes physical, also flows more naturally when consciousness aligns with spirit. Many emotional wounds persist because individuals remain attached to resentment, guilt, or fear. Spiritual awareness softens these burdens by encouraging forgiveness and compassion, both toward oneself and others. As emotional tension dissolves, the body and mind often respond with renewed strength and balance. Healing becomes less about forcing change and more about allowing harmony to restore itself. Relationships improve as well when spiritual alignment deepens. Awareness of divine presence encourages empathy and patience. Instead of reacting defensively, individuals become more willing to understand others' perspectives. Conflicts lose their intensity because the need to dominate or prove oneself right diminishes. Love and understanding become more natural expressions, strengthening connections and creating harmony where tension once existed. Another important result of spiritual alignment is freedom from constant striving. Many people live under pressure to achieve more, gain approval, or secure future stability. While ambition and effort still have value, they become balanced with trust when consciousness aligns with spirit. Actions are guided by purpose rather than fear of failure, and success is appreciated without becoming the sole measure of worth. This balance brings satisfaction and reduces exhaustion caused by endless striving. Gratitude naturally increases as spiritual awareness grows. Small blessings that once went unnoticed become sources of joy. The individual becomes more aware of support received through relationships, opportunities, and everyday provisions. Gratitude deepens alignment, creating a cycle where awareness fosters appreciation and appreciation strengthens awareness. Another transformation occurs in how time is experienced. Anxiety often arises from dwelling on past mistakes or worrying about future uncertainty. Alignment with spirit draws attention to the present moment, where divine presence is accessible. Living in this awareness reduces mental tension and encourages mindful engagement with each experience as it unfolds. As consciousness remains aligned with spirit, life gradually feels less fragmented. Work, relationships, rest, and spiritual practice become integrated aspects of a unified experience rather than separate pursuits. Guidance appears when needed, peace sustains during uncertainty, and healing continues as emotional burdens are released. Challenges still occur, yet they no longer dominate perception because awareness remains rooted in a deeper reality beyond temporary circumstances. Over time, alignment becomes less of a deliberate effort and more of a natural state. The mind learns to return to spiritual awareness even during stress, allowing calmness and clarity to guide responses. Life feels supported rather than chaotic, and the individual begins to trust the unseen wisdom shaping each experience. Peace, guidance, and healing continue to unfold as consciousness remains open to divine influence, gently shaping thoughts and actions within the rhythm of everyday living where spiritual awareness sustains hope and understanding, allowing inner harmony to guide each step while the presence of spirit continues to flow through every experience and perception without interruption. As alignment deepens with the unfolding journey of life and awareness remains quiet in the sustaining presence, quiet and coexistence and wholeness beyond those residual stances and personal limitation between spiritual consciousness and demon. He means for you will be experience. In the end, to pray without ceasing is not about withdrawing from life, but about living every moment in conscious awareness of the divine presence within and around us. It is the quiet realization that prayer is not limited to words or specific moments but becomes a continuous inner communion guiding thoughts, actions, and relationships. As awareness deepens, fear gives way to trust, ordinary activities become sacred, and life itself becomes an expression of spiritual connection. Through inner awareness, listening, spiritual attentiveness, and alignment with spirit, peace begins to flow naturally, guidance becomes clearer, and healing unfolds within the heart and mind. Challenges no longer appear as obstacles alone but as opportunities to grow in faith and understanding. One learns to move through life with patience, compassion, and confidence, knowing that divine presence accompanies every step. Thus, praying without ceasing is ultimately a way of living in which every breath becomes an act of trust, every action an expression of gratitude, and every moment an invitation to remain inwardly connected to the source of peace and wisdom that continually sustains and guides the soul throughout the journey of life.